Good afternoon, and thank you for sticking around over the lunchtime for my talk. My name is Noah Silverman, originally American, but now living in Hong Kong for 10 years. Been working with Bitcoin since about 2011. Most of the time I work with financial engineering and nasty mathematics side, but for this conference I thought I'd talk about something a bit more interesting, which is Bitcoin and money laundering. As a lot of you are aware, there's been tons of activity in the space recently, and it's only getting worse. To start, I'd like to read this quote by Frank Herbert, who wrote the Dune series, right? Bureaucracy destroys initiative. There's little that bureaucrats hate more than innovation, especially innovation that produces better results than the old routines. Improvements always make those at the top of the heap look inept. Keep that in mind as we go through this talk. Before we start, quick poll. Who here is criminal? Please raise your hand. Excellent. Any terrorists? Any tax cheats? Anybody violating government sanctions? Because all of the authorities would like to know, and if you would volunteer, it would certainly make their job easier. Okay. Let's start with a little FUD. There's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doom around crypto, mainly from governments and traditional finance. Does everybody remember this guy? Most of the drama and the problems we have, including the last talk, is indirectly this guy's fault. For those of you who don't know, September 11th, he masterminded the largest terrorist attack in U.S. history and flew planes into the World Trade Center. Or he didn't, his team did. As a result, these guys created this, the US Patriot Act. The US Patriot Act was an Orwellian, massive, overreaching surveillance legislation that gave the government insight into everything, legally, illegally, doesn't matter. Something that the group here may not be aware of, and I don't have a slide on this, is the US built the largest data collection center in the world in Utah. Warehouses and warehouses and warehouses full of hard drives. They vacuum up every piece of digital data possible with the argument that we're not looking at it yet, but we're keeping it in case we need to look at it later, so it's not illegal. The Patriot Act covers all sorts of surveillance, but there are some key points that dramatically affect those of us in the Bitcoin world and cryptocurrency in general. Right? Top left, to strengthen U.S. measures to prevent, detect, and prosecute international money laundering and financing terrorism. You'll hear that term a lot, right? To subject to special scrutiny foreign jurisdictions, foreign financial institutions, and classes of international accounts that are susceptible to criminal abuse. Now they're saying that accounts in the cryptocurrency and Bitcoin world fall into that category. I'll let you read the other two in the future. The U.S. government, it's one of my favorite cartoons, always wraps their new laws and their new surveillance, either anti-terrorism or protect the children. It is the perfect excuse for any legislation you want to get by. Now, does everyone know who this charming woman is? Right? This is Elizabeth Warren. She's a U.S. senator, and she has made it her personal mission to fight Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general. She warns the national security chiefs about Iranian crypto mining, because if a miner in Iran produces the block, well, then it's terrorist funding, so all of the sats that come from that are now linked to terrorist funding, and that's horrible. There's a crackdown on crypto roles and child sexual abuse. You see the pattern here. Terrorists, children. Crypto funding fentanyl, the drug problem. SEC's wrong on the law approving ETFs. She wants to question Biden officials about crypto to evade sanctions. Child sexual abuse. More issues, right? Change the banking laws. It's always crypto and children, or terrorists and children, on and on. Elizabeth Warren recently authored a bill, not yet approved. It's the Digital Asset Anti-Money Laundering Act. This is currently being debated in Congress. She wants to extend the banking security laws to miners, validators, digital asset wallet providers, and network participants. They're now pushing this concept of unhosted digital wallets, which basically means a wallet that's not on an exchange. This is my unhosted cash wallet. I would argue if you put money in your pocket, that is an unhosted wallet, or what they call it a non-custodial wallet. But now they want to start tracking those. They want AML and counter-financing terrorism controls for all of cryptocurrency. They want to extend foreign bank account rules to digital assets. For those of you that aren't American expatriates, you may not know, but if you live out of the U.S., you have to report every bank account you have anywhere in the world and any brokerage account to the U.S. government every year, or there's a big fine. They now want to include cryptocurrency accounts. And they want the Financial Crimes Network of the U.S. to monitor all the crypto ATMs around the world. This bill is not passed, but she's pushing it. Even the U.S. government, the Internal Revenue Service, on the main tax filing form, on the very front page, asks, do you have any digital assets? Have you traded any digital assets? They're coming for it, and they're not hiding it. Some scary stuff, so have a puppy for a second and catch your breath before we go to the next piece. So what is money laundering, right? You keep hearing all this talk about stopping money laundering, anti-money laundering, Bitcoin is money laundering, and there are all these acronyms. So I thought we'd just take a minute and talk about them, right? Why do people launder money? According to the government, they want to hide proceeds of a crime, you want to avoid paying tax, you're funding terrorists, you're getting around sanctions, or maybe you just like privacy. But the government never likes number 5, right? Money laundering is defined as 3 things. Placement, getting your illegal money or your shady money into the financial system. Layering, moving the money around to hide it. And then integration, getting it back out somewhere. This is how a lot of the crypto guys got in trouble. Samurai is an example, right? Layering. Well, if you're doing whirlpools or mixers or swaps that are designed to hide your funds, that's layering. If you're letting people deposit cryptocurrency into this mixer without being KYC'd, that's placement, and so on. So this is what they're using. An effective AML program at a company needs 4 pieces. You need a written program, a compliance officer, ongoing training, and an independent auditor. So when you deal with a platform that wants KYC or wants details on your deposit, they're following this structure. Now, before I go to this slide, I should just add, all of this is U.S.-based. So you may think, well, I'm not in the U.S. or I'm not a U.S. citizen. This doesn't apply to me. But it does. The U.S. government has managed to lean on and leverage, not all, but a majority of the other governments and banks in the world to cooperate with U.S. policy. The U.S. sets the standard that everyone follows. One of the big exceptions is China, which has their own set of standards, but I don't think they're any friendlier to cryptocurrency trading. But most of what's happening is getting driven by the U.S. government from that old Patriot Act. So here we have FinCEN, which is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and we'll get into them in a minute. They're the bad guys. AML is anti-money laundering. KYC is know your customer. CFT is counter-financing of terrorism. MSB, this is an important one, is a money service business. They're now arguing that many of the crypto companies that you'll see even here on the floor at the show count as a money service business, which all of a sudden obligates them to lots of legal requirements that most of them are not following. The Bank Secrecy Act is another nasty one we'll get into, and so is an SAR, Suspicious Activity Report. So FinCEN, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Despite the name, their main job is to gather data, right? They receive and maintain financial transaction data, and they want data on everything. They want data on every transaction in the world everywhere. U.S. people that have to report their bank account, you don't report it to the IRS, you report it to FinCEN. Because again, they're saying, we haven't accused you of a crime, but we want to know where all your money is and all the trades you've done in case later, 10 years from now, we decide you've done a crime. They were created in 1970, and they weren't doing much until the US Patriot Act again in 2001 gave them broad authority. KYC, which is one of FinCEN's concepts, know your customer. I'm sure we've all dealt with this, all right? Government ID, proof of address, due diligence. There are now global databases and services that they will submit your name to make sure you're not what's called a politically exposed person, there are not sanctions against you, and you're not subject to any kind of monitoring. I used to be director of a fund, and every week I got an email from the fund government authority saying, here's a list of names of the new people that are now sanctioned. And it was an amazing list. They were adding people as fast as they could. Money service business, right? It includes, and this is a nasty bit, Any person doing business, whether or not on a regular basis or as an organized business concern in one or more of the categories. Most of these don't apply, but number one, currency exchange or dealer, right? Or number four, money orders or stored value, and number five, money transmitter. Now, depending on your point of view, Bitcoin is money or Bitcoin is not money. If the government wants to prosecute you, they're going to decide it's money. You're not classified as a money service business, even if you've only done this occasionally and you're not an official company. Now they have leverage to come after you. The other nasty bit is the Bank Secrecy Act. Any transaction involving 10,000 US dollars or more of currency, or multiple transactions in the same day, or transactions just under $10,000, so it looks like you're trying to get around it, require the financial institution to file what's called a suspicious activity report. The nasty bit is, it's a gag order. They legally cannot tell you they filed a report about you, so you never know. Now, these activity reports don't mean you've committed a crime. They're not indicted for anything, but they go in a government database and they go in a law enforcement database so that, again, in the future, it leaves a paper trail. As you see, all of this is about creating a paper trail and taking away your privacy so that in the future, if they want to leverage you for something or prosecute you for something, they can. So what about Bitcoin, right? This is why we're all here. The most interesting news of the week, of course, is or last week, I guess, the Samurai Wallet founders got arrested. Their website was seized. And there was a nice press release from the US government explaining what they did. It's worth reading. I'm hoping these slides will be available. If not, I'll put them on my website. There's a link at the bottom. Basically, they claimed that the Samurai Wallet was an unlicensed money transmitting business with over $2 billion in unlawful transactions and $100 million in criminal proceeds. The way the federal government of the US works is they collect data on you for a long time, possibly a year, before they even bother to come and arrest you. So they've done their homework and more than their homework. So they have these numbers. I'm sure they've did all the chain analysis and looked at all the wallets and watched all the Whirlpool stuff. Their justification is the second paragraph I pulled out, right? Private keys are not shared with Samurai employees. So the Samurai guys thought, hey, we're clean. We're not touching the keys. We never touch the funds. We don't touch the UTXOs. But Samurai operated a centralized server that supervises and facilitates transactions. So that's how the government is hanging on their lawsuit. And they were arrested in Portugal, charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering and sent back to the US. One of the mistakes Samurai did, and I want to highlight this, people in this space tend to get egos, and they need to be careful. The Samurai guys on Twitter, I used to follow, like to brag. They like to pretend they were these cool gangstery guys flaunting the law and drawing attention to themselves. I would argue that if you're operating a privacy-based business for things like mixing, you probably don't want to be showing off on Twitter, right? Welcome new Russian oligarch Samurai Wallet users came up as soon as Russia was sanctioned. The other fun one, Europol highlighted Samurai Wallet as an emerging top threat in the same article. Do you see us shitting our pants? They're thumbing their nose at law enforcement. And I guarantee you law enforcement's reading this. Do you think it's helping you? Right? And then in their business plan, their actual published business plan they were using for fundraising, notice the second item, dark and gray market participants. So again, they're publicly advertising an illegal activity. Now, it's not just Samurai Wallet. At the moment, times are scary. Everyone is getting in trouble for money laundering and cryptocurrency. And I don't have time to go through these, but it's again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and so on. It doesn't stop. Now, there's even a new bill that's in Congress right now. The text is a bit small, but they want to put a 2-year moratorium on financial institutions taking any digital currency from external wallets or anything that came through any kind of mixer. It's a 2-year pause so they can study it, but this is going to turn into another law that's going to get worse. Taiwan just proposed new AML amendments to seek jail terms yesterday. Not approved yet, but it's coming. This, of course, leads to a new industry, and you heard a little bit about that in the last talk, which is surveillance. If you're operating a Bitcoin-based business and you're trying to be legal and compliant, you need to be very careful, right? Nobody wants to go to jail. Nobody wants their business shut down. The investors don't want to lose their investments and so on. So we now have a surveillance industry. 4 of the well-known ones, or 3, chain analysis, score chain, and cipher trace. And a new one coming out of China I recently met, BitRace. They used to advise the government, Chinese government and law enforcement, and had so much business they couldn't handle it all, so they decided to start a company and actually make it into a proper chain analysis type firm, but geared towards the Chinese market, mostly in the Chinese language. I would argue if you're trying to do money laundering and you're trying to have privacy in your finance for whatever reason, Bitcoin is the wrong tool. As we all know, the blockchain is this wonderful immutable ledger of everything. That's what makes Bitcoin so great. But it also leaves the perfect paper trail for anything you do. So you don't want to launder money with this. It's horrible. And the issue becomes KYC. I didn't have a good logo for it, but there's a term in law enforcement called a KYC touch point. And that's something you need to be aware of. Maybe I meet someone here and I sell him a t-shirt and he pays me with Bitcoin. And then I go somewhere else and I buy a coffee with it. And then the coffee place, I don't know, the owner there buys a magazine subscription with their address. So that's a KYC touch point. The law enforcement just looks at the UTXO for the person who provided their address. They go and arrest them and say, who did you do business with? And then they come and talk to me, and they arrest me and say, who did you do business with? And they go talk to that person. So even though you're private, if anywhere in the chain after your private transaction, someone touches something that's KYC'd, that can get traced back to you. So the fact that we have blockchain and KYC touch points in the system means that you should not use Bitcoin for anything private unless you think there's some new mixer technology that you're not aware of. To illustrate this is a classic graph that people have seen going around, and this is in billions of dollars, the amount of cryptocurrency laundered through, or sorry, a lot of funds laundered through USD compared to Bitcoin. It's tiny. No one's using it for money laundering. So that raises the larger question. Why is the government and why do the banks really want to control and shut down Bitcoin? I don't personally believe it's for money laundering. I think that's a convenient excuse to not have a parallel financial system. And you could take another path. I hear this one a lot, right? Just use Monero, bro. Monero's private. It's great. Yeah. Monero's, local Monero just shut down a few days ago. So they're worried about getting in trouble as well. Could you do it with Monero? Maybe. Do you want to? Maybe. Maybe. But you need to think about this stuff. Right? So in conclusion, the government is right now, these are dark times. The government is relentless about KYC and AML. The long arm of the law is very long. If you live in Portugal and you hide your servers in Iceland and you're paying for your servers in Bitcoin, they'll still find you, right? So if you're doing something in the Bitcoin world right now, be compliant. If you want to develop privacy technology and help this whole industry and all of us, that's awesome. But don't do something centralized, and certainly don't brag about it on social media, right? You know, one of the best definitions I've ever heard of DeFi at an Ethereum conference was if someone puts a gun to your head, can you turn it off? And if the answer is no, then it's decentralized. So if you want to create some privacy tools for Bitcoin, great, but create something that is really decentralized. I personally don't know how to do that, but maybe someone here wants to innovate. And the last one is a question, right? It's difficult to be both mainstream and private. Do we want Bitcoin to become a global currency that's adopted as an alternative financial system that provides all of the great benefits? That's great. Unfortunately, that means we're going to have to cooperate with the traditional financial system because the government and law enforcement have guns and soldiers. So you're going to need to play with them. On the other hand, if we want to be private and independent and separate, that's also great, but it's going to be very, very hard to integrate with the traditional financial system and always be looking over your shoulder for the government. I don't have an answer. I've met people that lean both ways, but it's something for us to discuss and debate. That's all I have for today. If you are interested in contacting me, my email's down there and my website's on the right. And thank you for your time.